We begin with what officials in Washington, D.C. are doing. They are still assessing the level of destruction from a U.S. bombing mission over Iran. The precision military operation on June the 22nd was historic in military terms, and Tampa Bay's MacDill Air Force Base played a key role in that. Take a look. Four-star General Michael Kurilla is the commander of U.S. Central Command headquartered at MacDill Air Force Base. CENTCOM oversees U.S. military operations in the Middle East, Central and South Asia, and the surrounding waterways, 21 countries in all, including Iran. This command directed the precision attack on 3 nuclear facilities in Iran. Here's General Dan Kane, chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
At midnight Friday into Saturday morning, a large B-2 strike package comprised of bombers launched from the continental United States. As part of the plan to maintain tactical surprise, part of the package proceeded to the west and into the Pacific as a decoy, a deception effort known only to an extremely small number of planners and key leaders here in Washington and in Tampa.
B-2 Spirit bombers were used in the attack of the nuclear sites in Iran. Because of their small size, these stealth bombers required multiple in-air refueling during the 18-hour flight into Iranian airspace. MacDill has KC-135 Stratotankers designed for in-flight refueling operations and is one of a select few military bases in the U.S. to have them. Whether KC-135s from MacDill were used in Operation Midnight Hammer has not been revealed. We do know that CENTCOM had command of the submarine which launched Tomahawk land cruise missiles into Iran. And this is still a developing story with many layers, but one of the things that many folks can agree on is that our military veterans in the Tampa Bay area performed the operation admirably. Tara, I'd like to ask you how you see all of this playing out.
I think that all of us are very grateful to the men and women in all military branches, but especially the Air Force. I have a nephew and a soon-to-be wife that are enlisted and prepping for their service. And that's what makes this so difficult, because they are at the heart of a constitutional storm. And so from a constitutional provision, we have 7 articles in the U.S. Constitution. Article 1 grants Congress the ability to declare war. Article 2 grants the executive branch the commander-in-chief role. They have to have a meeting of the minds before they go forward with warlike efforts. And that's what's so difficult right now, is that we're really seeing that there's a real difference of opinion of whether that meeting of the minds actually happened. And so as we see this sort of develop, we know that historically these kind of constitutional queries have happened. That's why in the 1970s we had the War Powers Act that Congress pursued to make sure that we limited the president's ability to engage in military entanglements without congressional approval. These are true servant leaders, our men and women in service. And so that's what makes it really tough to see them at the heart of this debate, because we don't want to abuse their sacrifices, and we want to make sure that we honor them for the purpose that they've given. So I think we're all really watching to make sure that, not just those in the Tampa Bay area, but those across the world that are serving are actually being protected, and that those checks and balances are happening.
And Travis, on the other side of the coin, you have an administration that says the checks and balance were observed and are in place.
Trump, just like presidents past, acted within his constitutional authority under war powers and other provisions to address threats to the nation. And so now it becomes an us against them, and it's at least perceived in the media as an attack against the men and women who made the bombing run. And so and that's kind of how that debate has shifted into that, that situation. We don't want to see that. I mean, look, MacDill is great for our community. We love those folks. I've got many friends who work on post, CENTCOM, SOCOM. It's obviously an economic engine here in Tampa Bay, but also great community members, right? And so they live all over the community, and they're an integral part of it. So I wasn't surprised at all, given the complexity of the military operation, to see them involved in it in a very meaningful way.
Has played such a central role since the 9/11 attacks in 2001.
What I would say here is that, number one, making sure that the president has the authority to extend military action is in no way any statement on the troops. And I do think that some people who are advancing that argument are trying to stop people from criticizing the president rather than advancing anything that's actually happening. I would also say that Congress has a long history, when there were Democratic and Republican presidents, of not enforcing its own rules about this and letting presidents take military actions in ways that were always questionable. So just because Obama did it, just because Clinton did it, does not mean that it's okay, and doesn't mean that we shouldn't be asking these questions, and I don't think it's a settled question. But the main thing that bothers me as a journalism expert is getting access to accurate information. One of our biggest problems in this situation is that we have heard conflicting reports about how successful this bombing raid even was.
The efficacy
and we
of it,
have
yes.
heard, we've heard leaked reports that CNN and the New York Times have reported saying that it had limited effect. We have Trump and Pete Hegseth saying one thing, we have the Israelis saying something slightly different, and we have the Iranian government saying something slightly different. We need to have independent journalists who have access to these areas so that they can tell us independently what actually happened, and that's one of the big problems we have. We don't even have video of the bombings.
Well, that's not going to. I mean, that can't happen. It's not going
It
to
has
happen.
happened
This is,
before.
This is
it has happened before.
30,000-pound bombs
We've had
being
video.
dropped.
We've had video of bombing
You think
runs
it's a
in
security-
lots of different military
absolutely.
operations.
Absolutely, they're not going to give you all the OPSEC. I mean,
We've had video
all
of bombing runs in plenty of military operations. It's not impossible
When
for
you're
them
talking
to let
about a
us see it.
mass campaign bombing run, this is a whole different operational security level that was undertaken. But these are stealth
I actually
bombers.
think that the real issue is the transparency.
You can't be transparent about
No, the
every
transparency
aspect
with
of
making
it.
sure that the Gang of Eight, both Democratic and Republican leadership, understand what is at risk, and that's what did not happen. And that is a little bit unprecedented because congressional leaders are at the table. Constitutionally, they're invited to be at the table. So, you have to at least look at, before you even get to the point of real journalism, the decision being made, and it was supposed to include all leaders.
They have the authority to introduce legislation then to try to prohibit the president from doing that.
John,
But of
I'd like
course,
to hear
our
what
party
Jonathan
controls
thinks about all of this.
I think that, for OPSEC to suddenly start mattering to Defense Secretary Hegseth, like all of a sudden we can't reveal, information about this strike. We're kind of shutting down journalist questions in the press room about it. That's a new thing for Hegseth, in my opinion. Was this a
considering
very
he texted all the plans out and
right?
Whether an attack is going to happen is one thing, but whether an attack, first off, if we can get intel on what the impact was in those shafts leading down to that nuclear facility, we're not going to put it out in the media. You're not going to get access to it. You want to know why? Because people will die over there for it.
The president has already said that they have obliterated their ability to
Well,
make...
it's a 30,000, there was multiple 30,000 pound
So he's
bombs.
already released information. The question is whether or
has.
not it's accurate.
If you've been in the desert and seen a 5,000 pound bomb go down, I mean, that's a massive ordinance to me, but this was truly massive
Well,
ordinance.
it's definitely-
We'll find out later on whether it
There's
works or
one
not.
point, though, that I think Eric made that I want to say again before we shift off the story. Questioning is part of the American experience. Questioning authority is what we as citizens
And
are
I'm not
supposed to do.
saying don't do that.
But
I'm
what
not saying
is
don't do
being
that.
shut down is any kind of separation between questioning what the president is doing and being unpatriotic. And that's a theme that goes throughout this administration. And that needs to shift.
Well,
because
your
this
party's
isn't.
kind of had a problem with appearing
and-
very
and
unpatriotic.
What's great is that American servicemen and women are not partisan. They're part of all of our
Amen to that. I
sacrifices.
agree with you on
That's,
that.
and
for
we
sure.
can all agree on that.